Santana, ooh, I wanna have ya. Tanaka's Fakakta, Jag like Michael Waka, Polanco and Franco. Where'd you go to myself?
Get into first place. Check batting by data and swinging strike rates. Raisins are shriveled grapes. Here's Adam's happy place.
Happy KOKOMO Friday, and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on February 18th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White, and today is a huge day, not just because it's our relief pitcher preview, but I have in my possession an updated version of KOKOMO Friday, which we will play at the end of today's podcast. Huge shout out to our buddies, Doc Krotzer and Dave Scaff, for putting it together. It is truly amazing. Move over, Adam. There's a new host now. I kind of feel like this is my coronation on the podcast.
You're included in the new version of the KOKOMO Friday song. Yeah. No, this is great. This is a momentous occasion. Everybody will want to listen through to the end because of that. As if as if they don't have enough reasons to.
Oh yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to hear my sleepers outside of the top 400 ADP by the end of this podcast, right?
Relief pitcher. I mean, who does it? We got two Barlows to talk about. We got to talk about Scott, not me, but Scott Barlow, and we got to talk about Joe.
Oh, we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
A lot to talk about indeed here, Scotty. Today on the show, it's our relief pitcher preview. We're going to try and figure out who these closers are. We're going to hit some ADP review, sleepers, breakouts, busts, SPARPs. Those are starting pitchers as relief pitchers, holds targets, and more. But Scotty, eventually we had to talk about relievers, and I realized it's probably not the smartest idea to do this early in the off season, but it's where it fit into the schedule. We have to do it eventually. I'm sure we'll do multiple updates to these position previews. Obviously, once the lockout ends, it's going to be fast and furious signings, trades, and hopefully more bullpens will shake themselves out and closer situations will emerge as well. So we'll do some updates, but we're going to give it our best, Scott. We're going to try and figure out who are the closers as of today.
Here's the thing, though. I think, yes, it seems bad to do it now when so much is uncertain, but I think just given the state we're in, the place we're at with bullpen roles and the way managers handle them, I don't think. I think there's going to be a lot of guesswork regardless. I mean, we need clarity on where Kenley Jansen signs. We need clarity on where Craig Kimbrell's traded, presuming he is traded. But those are the main things we're going to find out between now and opening day. I don't know that we're going to, like, right now there are, in my estimation, 10 surefire closers for the 30 teams. And then for a lot of teams, there are guys who I feel pretty confident saying they're the closer, but it's never been made official, and I don't think it will be made official before opening day. So we're gonna have to continue to play hunches for a lot of these bullpens.
And let's talk about the state of the closer, Scott, before we get into anything else, any strategy discussion, any ADP, just what is going on right now in baseball. We know that this is a huge point of contention when it comes to fantasy baseball. Obviously, saves and steals for those who play in category leagues, head-to-head categories, Roto. It's a really, really tough category to nail down because over the past couple of years, managers have been moving more towards closer by committee. So what does that mean exactly? They're using multiple closers. They're using 2 or 3. They're playing the matchups. They're not necessarily using their best reliever in the 9th inning. They might be using that reliever as a multi-inning setup reliever, something like that. So we've seen all these different types of usages at the back end of bullpens. And I'll give you an example. So in 2018, we had 1,244 saves. 165 different relievers attained those saves. In 2019, that number went down to 1,180, and 199 relievers attained those saves. So think about that. The number of saves has gone down. The number of relievers getting those saves has gone up. So
Yeah.
that's why we are seeing less and less of these true closer studs that we've seen in the past, 40, 50 plus saves. I mean, you'll be lucky to get 30 plus saves out of your first closer on your fantasy team. It's really just the nature of the position. You look at last year as well, 1,191 saves, 198 different relievers picked up those saves last season. So again, it's much like 2019 where saves are going down, but more relievers are picking up those saves. So that's why it's honestly tougher, Scott, to pick up saves in your fantasy league as a result of that. It's
Tougher
tougher
to
to
pick up
do.
saves.
It's tougher to do with a set number of relievers on your team. Unless you're continuously cycling through these relievers that are getting all of these different saves, there's just
Mhm.
not as many singular closers that are getting 30 plus or honestly even
Yeah.
20 plus saves anymore.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to feel confident when you pick up a guy for saves that he's actually going to continue getting saves. I do think it's an oversimplification though to say a lot of teams are going by committee. Yes, more relievers are getting saves. Um, but there are more factors contributing to it than that. Um, among them Among them is just I think managers have a quicker hook. So, what I see less is pitcher A gets the save one day, pitcher B gets the save another day, pitcher C gets the save another day. Like that's what I think most people think of when they think of committee. What I see is pitcher A is the go-to saves guy for 3 weeks. And then he does something that loses the manager's trust. And so pitcher B becomes the go-to saves guy for however many weeks before he loses the manager's trust. Um, if you're talking true committee, I think Seattle had that last year, the Mariners.
Mhm.
I think the Rays had that last year. They pretty much have it every year. At least that Kevin Cash has been there. But maybe the Orioles, but they get their save chances were so infrequent. We never really got a good grasp of what they were doing. The Tigers, maybe, though I do think AJ Hinch had stretches of the season where he played favorites between Gregory Soto and Michael Fulmer. But I'm not sure any of the others were committees. Maybe the Reds. Maybe
The
the
Reds
Reds.
were
So
the
that
Reds
was
were a
just
mess.
I think the Reds was partly just everybody was so bad that they tried there that they never did stick with anybody. Now for a lot of the year, it looked like the Royals were going with the committee. They
Mhm.
finally settled on Scott Barlow. And there are a few other examples like that, teams where it was up in the air for a very long time, but then the manager did eventually settle on a guy. And so I think most are still inclined to do that. But yeah, quicker hooks, more teams that just have no interest in having a good enough reliever that they can really settle on a guy because everybody's just bad. So that contributes to there being quicker hooks as well. You mentioned a lot of managers like to have their best reliever in a more flexible role. So that means the guy in line for saves isn't as good, which makes him more vulnerable. So there's a lot going on here. But your overall point is right. I just don't want people to get I just don't want to reduce it to a committee because I think that gives people the wrong idea about how it's playing out.
All right, let's talk relief pitcher strategy, Scott. So in a standard 5x5 roto where you start 9 pitchers, there's usually a 900 to 1,000 inning pitched minimum for the season that you have to attain from those pitchers in your starting lineup. What is your usual breakdown in that league? Is it 6 starters and 3 closer hopefuls? Obviously, maybe you'll have one closer that you feel really good about, maybe 2 other speculative kind of guys. Is it 7 starters and 2 relievers? What's your usual breakdown in that format?
So optimally, 6 starters and 3 relievers. If you have 3 save sources in a 12-team league, if we're assuming there are 30 save sources, which obviously it's dicey, but theoretically there are 30 save sources, 12-team league. That means if you have 3 save sources, you're ahead of ahead of the game. Not everybody can have 3 save sources. But because of the way things have changed at relief pitcher and the way saves are distributed now, it's a long shot that you're actually going to get 3. So, it kind of depends how deep the league is. Obviously, if we're talking about like a 15-team league, like so many in the industry like to play in, I do think you probably need to go after a more surefire save source and maybe even get 2 of those guys. If it's a 12-team league, though, where you can trust yourself to pick up some safe sources off the waiver wire a little easier in that format, and you're not going to get these crazy fab bidding wars like you get in a 15-team league, then I'm okay not getting a closer at all. Of course, that's not the goal. The goal is 3, but it just kind of depends what they're going for. I don't want to sacrifice anything I'll genuinely miss for saves. And if that means I get left out, particularly in a shallower league, so be it. I'll figure it out as the season plays out. I think that's the right approach still, not paying for saves, even though it seems like the trend this year is to pay up for saves.
Yeah, I was going to wait until later on to talk about that, Scott, when we get into ADP. Some people, you might see that someone like Josh Hader or Liam Hendricks is going in the 4th round on average right now in 12-team leagues. Or you might see screenshots on Twitter where people are taking closers in the 3rd round. What I'll say about that, a lot of drafts that are going on right now over at the NFBC, those are draft and hold formats. There's no waiver wire. So very clearly, the quote-unquote safest closers are going to be pushed up the board because there are no waiver moves. Like, this is it. Your draft is everything. You draft 50 rounds worth, and that's it. That's your team. So you got to find a way to get saved somehow. So that's why they're getting pushed up in that format. But I do think in normal standalone 12-team Roto leagues, you might see a Hader or a Hendricks in the 4th, maybe the 5th round, but not earlier than that.
I mean, I can't speak to like the macro data, but I'm seeing them go 4th round, sometimes even earlier, even in leagues that aren't draft and hold. I do think you're right that is helping to elevate the ADP, but maybe it's kind of a circular thing where the ADP gets pushed up there, and so people start drafting them there. Another reason there's an incentive to do that is because, like I'm saying, there's only 10 surefire save sources right now. And people who are drafting right now, if they're committing to drafting right now, then they're not going to see how things play out in free agency and whatever. So they don't want to pay for saves that aren't actually saves. So the ones who seem most likely, who really do seem secure in those closer roles, are being elevated unlike ever before.
Yeah, so I perfectly said, Scott. Those fringe options right now, the Dylan Floros, the Barlows, we kind of think that those guys are the leaders for their respective teams, but there's still a lot that needs to shake out in free agency, trades, once the lockout is ended here. So because of that uncertainty, again, the quote unquote safest closers are being elevated to a level that we haven't seen in quite some time. Maybe, I feel like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, Kenley Jansen, Aroldis Chapman, these guys were elevated, but it's been a while since we've really, really seen that. But yeah, Liam Hendricks and Josh Hader, rightfully so. Those guys are head and shoulders ahead of the pack. Personally, for me, I'm with you, Scott. I like 6 starters, 3 relievers in the Roto format, and I typically like to get at least one of the top, 6 or 8 closers, that hero relief pitcher strategy. Someone like the Ryan Presley, Emmanuel Clase, Kenley Jansen's probably the cutoff. I think wherever he winds up, he'll be the closer. And then obviously I'll take some speculative options later on, but I do like to get at least one option that I feel really strong about in that format. Before we get to relief pitcher strategy in a head-to-head points league, Scott, which is very different than any type of Roto or categories league, what is a SPARP?
So SPARP is an acronym. It stands for starting pitcher as relief pitcher. It was coined by Anando DeFino when he worked with us at CBS and hadn't been exposed to too many points leagues, I don't think, at that point, and was disgusted by the practice of starting a a guy who was actually in a actually had a rotation spot, starting him in a relief pitcher spot and taking advantage of the volume that that is rewarded so highly in points leagues. So they are in high demand in that format for the reason I just gave. Sometimes I think too much is made of that because, yes, a good starting pitcher is better than a good closer, but the key word there is good.
Right.
And a lot of times the SPARPs, guys who obviously pitched in relief enough last year that they could retain that eligibility, just aren't in a position to accumulate the kind of stats needed to be a good starting pitcher at the major league level. My favorite by far this year is Ranger Suarez, but there are a couple others who are interesting.
Yeah, and we'll get to those names in just a little bit here. But I'm assuming, obviously, Scott, you like to draft SPARPs, but what is your overall relief pitcher strategy in head-to-head points leagues? Liam Hendricks was amazing last year. He scored 503.5 fantasy points on CBS, which would have ranked as the SP12. It was a little bit of an outlier performance. He threw a ton of innings. He had 8 wins, so that obviously contributed to that point total as well. You look at the next tier, Josh Hader and Raisel Iglesias. Those guys would have been more like SP20 through SP24, so a low-end SP2 in a points league. What is your overall strategy here? Do you want to grab 2 SPARPs, or is it maybe a mix and match, 1 SPARP and 1 closer?
It depends on the depth of the league again, but if we're assuming 12 teams or potentially even shallower, that's what most people play in. So again, let's do the math. Usually in points leagues, it's 2 dedicated relief pitcher spots. There are theoretically 30 closers in the majors, and only 24 of them are going to be in people's lineups. So there's more than enough to go around. And that's before you add in the SPARPs, who are also advisable starting options at relief pitcher in this format. So there's plenty of relief pitcher depth in a points league.
I mean, you mentioned, Scott, there's only 10 surefire closers.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like
at 10, it's kind of it's kind of shaky.
In a role that's as volatile as this is, that changes at the drop of a hat like this one does, how much is assurance worth? I think generally it's a bad idea to pay up for assurance. You know that if a guy holds a closer role all year, I mean, it mostly comes down to how many saves he gets, how valuable he is, especially in points leagues, because you don't get the ratio help, however small it is in categories leagues. You don't get that at all in points leagues. So it mostly comes down to how many saves he gets. And if a Scott Barlow, for instance, is the closer for the Royals all year, it's very likely the number of saves he gets is going to be similar to a Raisel Iglesias. And he could finish ahead of Raisel Iglesias potentially. Now, he's not as assured of keeping that job or even having that job from the start. But again, they're changing all the time. And in a league where so few relievers are going to be started, there's just not going to be a huge demand for the newcomers on the waiver wire. So long story short, yes, I like to get quality SPARPs in a points league if I can do so at a price that I feel is appropriate. But failing that, I just take whatever's left. I just take whatever's left at reliever. Like I might go reliever with my last 2 picks.
Yeah, I think we did a head-to-head points mock draft last week, and I waited very late, and I wound up with, I think, Mark Melanson and Craig Kimbrell, which
seems fine.
It's not flashy, but I think
it could be. If Kimbrell is a closer, he could be the best closer theoretically.
Yeah, so it's not flashy, but it should be able to get the job done. Who are the top SPARPs to target this season in head-to-head points leagues? Last year, quite bad for SPARPs. All right, let's get past that one and let's move forward and see what we can get. Ranger Suarez got, who you mentioned, Luis Severino. Obviously, if he can come anywhere close to the pitcher he was back in 2018, could pay off huge.
I shouldn't have said Suarez is my favorite by far because Severino's not that far behind him, and Severino has more upside probably.
Yep. The other names that I saw, and feel free to add any that I miss here, Scott, but Cal Quantrill with Cleveland, Drew Rasmussen with Tampa Bay, Zach Thompson and Jose Quintana with Pittsburgh seemingly going to be in their rotations. Are they going to be good? Probably not. I would bet on them not being great. These are maybes because I'm uncertain whether or not they will start for their respective teams. Michael Kopech, Adbert Alzolay, Nestor Cortez, Christian Javier, Andrew Heaney, yuck, Tyler Beatty, Taylor Hearn with the Texas Rangers. Scott, was there anyone that I missed or anyone that stands out for you as a SPARP this season?
I think you named some who aren't. So it's 10 relief appearances to retain relief pitcher eligibility into the following year. So I know Adbert Alzolay, he only got 8 relief pitcher appearances. Not to topple your research, which sounds very thorough, but here's who I have. Okay. Ranger Suarez and Severino, you mentioned them. Cal Quantrill, yes. Michael Kopech, who's a maybe for whether he's in the rotation. Aaron Ashby, Alex Reyes, Drew Rasmussen, who I know you mentioned, Christian Javier, Nate Pearson, the Blue Jays guy, David Price, Carlos Hernandez of the Royals, Reynaldo Lopez of the White Sox. It's probably going to be him and Kopech swapping out of that 5th spot, I would guess. And then AJ Puck of the Athletics. So I'm not sure about some of the ones you'd name, and I'd have to look them up one by one probably. But yeah, the standard, at least at CBS leagues, is 10 relief appearances to retain RP eligibility into the following season.
Well, Scott, I will point out that what I did was I used your Dynasty League and did relief pitcher projections, and then I just sorted by game started. So I just assumed anyone that was there had RP eligibility. So maybe not, but hopefully those guys do. Obviously, like I mentioned, the Pirates guys, I don't know if they're going to be good, but maybe as a 2-starter, as a SPARP, something like that. Lastly, let's quickly talk about strategy in head-to-head categories league, Scott. Obviously, the wild west, you can employ a Marmol strategy if you'd like. I'll explain it in just a little bit. But theoretically for you, how many relievers do you like to have in your starting lineup in a head-to-head categories league?
Pretty much the same as a Roto league. It maybe less, because what you could do in a head-to-head categories league is look at how many your opponent is starting the next week. But I at least like to have the option of being able to slot in 3 closers. And if my opponent only has 1 or whatever, obviously I probably wouldn't go with all 3 in that week. It depends how my starting pitchers are looking too.
Yeah, I like to have at least 4 in a head-to-head categories league in my lineup, 2 surefire closers, maybe another spec closer, and maybe just 1 reliever that's going to give me really strong ratios, lots of strikeouts. Typically, those go very late in your league, assuming that holds is not part of the categories that obviously you're competing in. But as a result of that, like you'll be able to get a Devin Williams or a Chad Green or a Paul Sewald, someone like that, pretty late in those formats, and you could just leave them in throughout the course of that week and pick up any strikeouts, ERA, whip help that you can possibly get.
Yeah.
The Marmol strategy, by the way, in case you're wondering, it's been used by many people over the past, I don't know, decade or so.
You don't even know who Carlos Marmol is, Frank.
Oh, Scotty, I am well aware of Carlos Marmol, former reliever of the Miami Marlins. Carlos Marmol, is that right? Chicago Cubs.
Cubs.
Okay, I said.
I don't. He may have pitched for somebody else, but primarily the Cubs.
Man, now I've got to look it up because
you don't know who Carlos Marmol is.
Oh, I know. I remember the struggle that was.
He did in his career with Miami. Made 15 appearances with an 8.10 ERA. So. Hopefully not part of the Marmol strategy then.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, what is this? In a head-to-head category league with either no weekly innings minimum or a low one, you use your first 10 or so picks on hitters. You don't draft a single starting pitcher unless your league requires you to do so. If you must draft a starting pitcher, you target ones late that have innings pitch concerns, but good ratios. From rounds 11 on, you focus on the remaining closers and high-end setup relievers with strong ratios. You punt wins and strikeouts, but your offense is theoretically good enough that you should win the hitting categories, and ERA whip saves most weeks. I have never used this strategy to success, but I know that many people have. So it's an option for those who play in head-to-head categories leagues.
Yeah. What makes relying on relief pitchers challenging, beyond the whole who's getting saves win thing, which, that in traditional fantasy leagues, that adds a ton of volatility on its own. But the sample you're dealing with is always so small. So, Paul Sewald, Chad Green, you mentioned as high end middle relievers. In Sewald's case, there might be some saves there as well. But what happens if they're terrible in April? Do you stick with them?
Which is definitely a possibility because there's so much variance year over year when it comes to reliever performance.
Yeah, and Sewald, of course, doesn't have any kind of track record. Green has pretty good track record, but Sewald doesn't. What if they're terrible in April? Do you stick with them, trusting that it'll even out, or do you move on to whoever the new Paul Sewald looks like on the waiver wire? And then if you do make the switch, what if the new Paul Sewald then goes belly up and falls apart himself? Like you're kind of chasing the nature of the position, the nature of the role. You're kind of always chasing the hot hand.
Yep.
And hopefully you eventually land on a guy who remains consistent for the rest of the season, but there's no guarantee of that. It can definitely be a self-defeating strategy beyond just the fact that you're limiting your upside in certain categories.
Yeah, I think maybe looking at matchups too, Scott. I mean, find whoever's facing the Pirates and the Orioles in a given week. I don't know. It's just like, obviously, like there is so much variance, not just year to year for relief pitcher performance, but week to week. Obviously, you're right about that. So, finding guys who have done it for a couple of years now, who have the track record, you just hope they continue to build on that. But, Devin Williams and Chad Green are the ones that probably stand out most for me. Paul Sewald, you're right. He really only did it last year, but he was like really, really awesome. So,
well, and Devin Williams, case in point, you mentioned, oh, well, he's a sure thing.
He struggled early last year.
He did finish strong, yes, but as late as early June, he had an ERA over 4.
Yep. I hear you. Look, this is what makes relief pitcher such a tough position here, Scotty. Let's do a quick exercise, and keyword quick. So let's try to breeze through this here, Scotty. We did it last year, but I think it's useful for the listeners to hear us just kind of talk this out. Let's try and figure out how many definitive closers we can name on each team. Before we do that, just a reminder that all of these relievers are currently free agents. Kenley Jansen, Ian Kennedy, Ryan Tepera, Richard Rodriguez, Brad Hand, Brad Boxberger, Adam Ottavino, Alex Colomé, Michael Givens, and Craig Kimbrell should be available via trade. The White Sox did pick up his option, but they signed Kendall Graveman, who will most likely be the setup man there. And obviously they have Liam Hendricks, so they should be able to get a pretty decent return for Craig Kimbrell.
I think all we're really looking at from that group being potential closers are Kenley Jansen and Craig Kimbrell. And I would say they're likely closers going into the new year. But of course, it depends who they end up with, or in Kimbrell's case, if he's traded at all.
Yeah. Ian Kennedy, I'll point out, he was really good last year. So maybe some lower end.
Until he joined the Phillies.
Yeah. Maybe he joins a lower end team on a 1-year contract. He pitches well the first half, and then they look to flip him for some kind of asset, whatever it might be. I'll say the same thing about Brad Boxberger. I know Brad Boxberger has been around for a while. You look at the numbers, he was really serviceable last season. So again, maybe some lower end team brings him in and then tries to ship him out midseason, something like that. Let's start with the American League, Scotty. And of course, the Yankees. They had 7 different relievers with a save last year. Aroldis Chapman led them with 30 saves. And as of now, Chapman is definitively the closer, right?
Yes, he's one of the 10 I keep referring to. I know you're worried about him, but yeah, there's no question who the closer is right now.
More on that in just a little bit. For the Red Sox, they had 10 relievers with a save last year. Matt Barnes led the team with 24 saves, and then he imploded in the second half. So I think this one's pretty up in the air right now, Scott. Matt Barnes, Garrett Whitlock, I think they're a candidate to either sign or trade for somebody as well.
Yeah, those are the 2 leading contenders, but I agree. This is a very much up in the air. Garrett Whitlock would be probably the first reliever I target there, but late.
Yeah, Garrett Whitlock was awesome last year. Shout out to the Red Sox, stealing him away from the Yankees. He was a Rule 5 draft pick, so great. Good job. For the Tampa Bay Rays, they had, wait for it, 14 different relievers with a save last season. Diego Castillo actually led them with 14 saves, and then he was traded to Seattle out of nowhere and then wasn't the closer for Seattle. So it was just a kind of a weird situation all around. Andrew Kittredge looks like the front runner, but we know the deal here with Tampa Bay. I think Pete Fairbanks could be involved. They have JP Fireisen. They have JT Chargois, who pitched well last year. So yeah, this one, it's Tampa Bay, Scott.
Yeah, it is. But if depending on the format, if it's late, I don't mind taking a shot on Kittredge. I think he, particularly if Colin McHugh is gone, he's a free agent currently. Kittredge is clearly the best reliever in the bullpen, and he was getting more consistent chances down the stretch. So I doubt it's going to be a situation where he becomes the guy, but I could see like 12 to 15 saves with strong ratios for him.
Yeah, I'm not going to completely rule out the possibility of drafting him. I think if you wind up with him late as your third closer option, just a speculative type guy, totally cool with that. The Toronto Blue Jays, they had 9 different relievers with a save last season. Jordan Romano led them with 23. And as of now, Jordan Romano, Scott, is definitively the closer, but the key word is for now, or words.
Yeah, he's one of the 10. He's one of the 10 for me. And as things stand now, I don't think the cost for him is so bad. I think he's certainly a deserving closer. But the Blue Jays do seem like the sort of team that could make a play for Kenley Jansen or Craig Kimbrell because they're trying to get over the hump. They really should have been a playoff team last year and weren't. So they might go the extra mile to just improve around the margins like that. But presuming they don't, Romano's a solid one.
For the Baltimore Orioles, 6 different relievers with a save last season. Cole Sulser and Cesar Valdez led the team with 8 each. It looks pretty fluid to me, Scott. Tyler Wells, Cole Sulser, I think they're probably the top options, but there's not a lot of save opportunities to go around here. They had the 5th fewest in baseball.
Yeah, that's been the story for them in recent years, pretty much ever since Brandon Hyde's been managing them. So we really don't have a good read on how he's going to handle this situation when there's something to play for. Yeah, I agree between Wells and Sulser, but not a big investment. You shouldn't be making a big investment in either.
It's a complete mess. By the way, Brandon Hyde hasn't had a reliever with more than 11 saves in his 2 full seasons as manager. So he's been there 2019 through 2021. I'm not counting 2020 because whatever, shortened season. But he hasn't had a reliever with more than 11 saves. It just seems crazy to me. It's, man, Brandon Hyde. He's kind of like the face of closer by committee matchups. And plus the Orioles just haven't really been good. So that obviously impacts that. The White Sox had 5 with a save. Liam Hendricks obviously led the team with 38. He is, one of 2, 1A, 1B, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, with Josh Hader. And obviously one of the 10.
For sure. Next up, we have the Cleveland Guardians. They had 5 different relievers with a save. Emmanuel Clase led them with 24. And even if James Karinchak bounces back, Scott, I think it's definitively Emmanuel Clase's job to start.
Yeah, he ran away with it in the second half. His fastball might be one of the most GIF-worthy pitches out there, and just impossible to square up. You can understand why he had a 1.27 ERA last year. In my mind, he's one of the 10.
For the Detroit Tigers, 8 different relievers with a save. Gregory Soto led the team with 18. Now, Scotty, earlier in the offseason, everybody thinks that it's Gregory Soto to be the closer for the Tigers because 2 days after the season ended, AJ Hinch had this to say, quote, Gregory Soto is our closer. But then he added, but he might pitch the 7th, the 8th, or the 9th, and sometimes the 6th. So there, I said it. Go with it. First tweet wins. And apparently this was some kind of running joke that he had all season with the press because they would constantly ask him, who's your closer? Who's your closer? And he would never give an answer. So he did that right after the season ended. And I think some people who play fantasy baseball might have taken it a little bit too literally. Plus, Michael Fulmer was just better when he pitched.
Yep. That's what aggregation does, right? You rely on the aggregator to give you the context, and sometimes they leave some out. So yeah, no, I never bought it anyway because it it just doesn't match up with the way Hinch handled his bullpen at all. And in fact, by the end of the season, Michael Fulmer was getting the majority of the save chances, not Gregory Soto.
Mhm.
And, I guess there's a chance Michael Fulmer could be put in the rotation again, though there's not a clear opening for him. So I suspect, and unless the Tigers are a team that makes a play for Kenley Jansen or Kimbrel, I suspect, I would probably draft Michael Fulmer ahead of Soto, actually, but not invest that much in either.
All right, so that one is open. For the Kansas City Royals, they had 8 with a save last year. Scott Barlow led them with 16, and it certainly seems like it is Scott Barlow's job to lose. He had 6 of the final saves in September. I will point out Josh Stallmont was very solid for the team as well.
Yes, but Barlow had been their best reliever, I think. No. Well, I mean, certainly all of last year, he was their best reliever. And you mentioned he had the last 6 saves. Really, it goes back basically from July on, he was their closer, basically.
Would you say that he is definitively the closer? Are we giving him that designation?
No, because it's what. So I wrote a closer strategies piece. I wrote a strategies piece for every position on CBSSports.com, and I had different categories that I grouped these relievers in. Surefire closers are the 10 I keep referring to. Probable closers is the next group, and that includes Kenley Jansen and Craig Kimbrel. It also includes Scott Barlow. So I feel pretty good about him being the closer, but Mike Matheny, I don't think he ever actually said as much. And there's still a little bit of a question there.
All right, for the Twins, 7 different relievers had a save last year. Alex Colomé led them with 17 saves. He is a free agent, no longer with the team. And it looks like Taylor Rogers will be there to start, but they did have 3 different relievers with 9+ saves last season. So I'm assuming this is not definitive either.
Yeah, I think Rocco Baldelli wants to be a committee guy. And Taylor Rogers...
I like Taylor Rogers, man.
I mean, we've seen him hold down the role more or less in past years, but he didn't really get that extended look last year. Of course, they had relievers who aren't there now, like Alex Colomé. And boy, who's their closer for what? Like Hansel Robles, I think.
Hansel Robles, point to the sky. Every time he thinks it's a pop-up, it's a home run.
Yeah, so I'm reluctant to endorse Rogers, but he does appear to be the best option in their bullpen as it stands now.
All right. For the Astros, they had 6 with a save. Ryan Presley led them with 26. Ryan Presley, definitively the closer, right?
Yes, one of the 10.
All right. So we've got 5 to this point. Let's keep on moving. The Angels, they had 5 with a save. Raisel Iglesias led them with 34. He re-signed in the offseason. He is one of the definitive closers, correct?
Yep.
All right, the Oakland A's, they had 5 with a save. Lou Trevino led them with 22. It seems like Trevino will be the front runner. Sounds like they're going to blow this team up. Maybe they trade him away. Diolis Guerra and AJ Puck were the other names that I was looking at in this bullpen.
So Trevino started out as the closer and then lost his job toward the end of the season, but nobody else really stepped up, and some of them are gone now. Some of the others they tried there. I suspect they'll default to Trevino, but I don't say that with a lot of confidence. And as you said, that he could end up being traded himself.
For Seattle, they had 8 with a save, 3 with double digits, and Drew Steckenrider led the team with 14 saves. Good luck figuring out this one. They have
goodness.
They have Ken Giles, who is coming back from Tommy John surgery. They signed him last offseason to a 2-year contract. So to me, it sounds like they were planning on him being the closer of the future, but now they have Drew Steckenrider, who was good last year, but lack of strikeouts, and the peripherals, not so great. Paul Sewald, awesome. Lots of strikeouts, but not much of a track record. And then they have Diego Castillo, who does have the track record, but was not used as their closer much last season. So good luck.
And I think there's somebody else, too.
Andres Munoz, who throws over 100 miles per hour, I believe.
Yeah, maybe. He got some closer of the future hype with the Padres, and and is coming off Tommy John surgery himself. So yeah, they have a lot of different directions they could go there. Toward the end of the season, it did seem like Scott Service was showing a slight preference for Drew Steckenrider in the 9th inning, but Steckenrider is probably the 4th most talented pitcher in that bullpen. So, and especially given that Service likes to mix it up, I don't have much confidence at all in him being the guy. I honestly don't know who I'd draft first here. I guess Steckenrider, just because I think he'll have the early advantage, but Seawald and Giles might both be better long-term plays.
Ken Giles, baby, the madman. Remember a couple of years ago, it's like punching his face coming off the mound in Yankee Stadium. What's going on here? The Texas Rangers, they had 5 with a save. Ian Kennedy led them with 16. Joe Barlow looks like the front runner, but far from a sure thing.
Yes, it's a similar situation to the other Barlow, Scott Barlow, except I just think Scott Barlow's better and more likely to keep the job because of that.
All right, so through the entire American League, 15 teams, 6 of them I have as definitive options. In the National League, for the Mets, they had 6 with a save. Edwin Diaz led them with 32. He is definitively the closer, right, Scott?
Yep, one of the 10.
One of the 10 indeed. For the Nationals, they had 4 with a save. Brad Hand led them with 21. He was traded at the deadline. And now it seems like we're left with Kyle Finnegan versus Tanner Rainey, which is not very good.
That is an ugly closer battle.
And then I think they could also sign or trade for somebody.
They could, but I don't think they're looking to contend at all, so they may not. And
I could see that team being a good landing spot for an Ian Kennedy or Brad Boxberger type.
Yeah, that could happen. I would say I would give the slight edge to Rainey now because I think there's more talent there than Finnegan, but he was just awful last year. So this is not a bullpen where I'm looking to invest much of anything right now.
For the Phillies, they had 7 with a save. Hector Neris led the team with 12. This was a mess all season long for Philadelphia. They signed Corey Knebel in the offseason. He seems like the front runner, Scott. I think maybe they can add another piece as well. As of now, Knebel is the guy, but is it definitive?
No, but it's probable. I'd put him in that same category as Scott Barlow because of the skills, first of all, and because also the day they signed him, Dave Dombrowski, who's running the Phillies now, was quoted as saying they're not looking to acquire a closer, which a lot of people, myself included, took to mean because we just got him.
Yeah. All right. Well, that would help us. Hopefully, look, Corey Knebel, when he was healthy a couple of years ago, he was pretty awesome. So I hope it works out there and we get another closer for fantasy. For the Atlanta Braves, they had 4 with a save. Will Smith led them with 37. He's one of the definitive closers.
He is one of the definitive ones, though. I think he's less certain of keeping the job than some of them. I don't think of him as like a closing stud or anything, but he had the job all year last year. It was a true closer role. So yeah, he's one of the 10.
For the Marlins, they had 3 with a save. Dylan Floro led them with 15. And it seems like it's Dylan Floro as of now, but I'll point out a few things. I think Anthony Bender is just a better reliever, and they've been linked to Kenley Jansen. So,
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah,
I agree. Floro is not the most talented reliever in that bullpen, but he got the job after they traded. Oh, I'm forgetting his name now.
Yimi Garcia.
Yeah, Yimi Garcia to the Astros. He started out as the closer. After he was gone, it was just Floro's job. Pretty straightforward. So, and he did fine. So I actually have him among the probable closers as well.
Okay, but not definitive, probable. We'll see if they sign somebody. For the Cubs, they had 12 with a save. Craig Kimbrell led them with 23. Obviously, they traded him away to the White Sox. This is pretty gross. It's Rowan Wick, Cody Hoyer. Maybe they sign somebody. I don't know, but it's wide.
Yeah. I would say Rowan Wick is the front runner there, but I don't know that in a 12-team Roto league, I'd be looking to invest much of anything in him.
For the Reds, they had 10 with a save. Heath Hembry and Michael Givens led them with 8 each. Lucas Sims looks like the front runner, but Art Warren, somebody I will talk about later on, had a 19% swinging strike rate and closing experience in the minors. I think this is kind of open, Scott, but Sims is the front runner.
Yes, it did seem like there were stretches last year where David Bell wanted to turn the job over to Sims, who certainly has the strikeout ability to stick in the role, but there were some injuries and there were just some ugly outings that kind of blew up his ERA. So I think it could be Sims, but Warren is the sort of alternative that I think they were looking for all of last season. And I could definitely, I agree. I could see him claiming the role at some point.
For the Brewers, they had 6 with a save. Josh Hader led them with 34. He is one of the definitive options in fantasy, 1A or 1B with Liam Hendricks, obviously. For the Pirates, they had 3 with a save. Richard Rodriguez led them with 14. He was traded away to the Atlanta Braves. And now it becomes David Bednar versus Chris Stratton. Kind of interesting, Scott. This is obviously not a definitive situation, but Bednar is far and away the better reliever, but Stratton had 7 of 10 saves after Richard Rodriguez was traded. So
yeah,
maybe he starts.
Right. Starts out as the closer. That's how I think you have to, unless we hear something different as they're gearing up for the season, obviously. I think you have to approach it as if Stratton is the guy to start out. But it's like we were saying for the Miami bullpen, Floro versus Anthony Bender. Floro's got it. Bender's better. I think this is a more extreme version of that. Stratton isn't as good as Floro. Bednar is better than Bender. Bednar, the Pirates option, is better than Bender, the Marlins option.
But they are both very talented. So
yeah,
I mean, again, this is where we're at in terms of bullpen usage right now. It's tough. Not, the best reliever doesn't always become the closer right now. For the Cardinals, they had 7 with a save. Alex Reyes led them with 29. He imploded late in the season, and Giovanni Gallegos just picked it up, man. 11 saves in September. He's been amazing the past couple of years. Finally got his opportunity. I think he's the one to start. I don't think it's definitive because Alex Reyes and Jordan Hicks are still looming there.
Yes, they are. Gallegos has been the Cardinals reliever, like their best reliever 3 years in a row now, and he's gotten chances to close, including at the end of last season. They don't seem to want to stick with him in the role. Like, they seem to prefer to keep him versatile, multi-inning guy, setup guy. I do have him as a probable closer because he finished so strong and because they haven't brought in anyone new yet. But I don't feel totally confident he's going to hold on to that. If Alex Reyes doesn't win a rotation spot, because he's in the mix for that, if that doesn't happen, then of course he's going to be a threat to Gallegos, as will Jordan Hicks, who at one point looked like the long-term closing option for them before Tommy John surgery and everything.
For the Diamondbacks, they had 8 relievers with a save last season. Joaquin Soria and Tyler Clippard led them with 6 each. 6 each.
I mean, so bad.
Diamondbacks were just a dumpster fire.
So then they signed Mark Melancon.
Yeah, who, look, we have questions about, obviously, he's older. He kind of faltered a little bit down the stretch, but he's been the guy. And I think he is one of the definitive options right now in fantasy.
He is one of the 10. He's clearly the worst of the 10 in terms of ability and situation, because part of the issue was the Diamondbacks so rarely had a save chance. Didn't they have a stretch where they lost like 29 of 30 games or something?
Yeah, I think they had I think it was like a 6-week span where they didn't get a save in fantasy, Scott.
Yeah, it was awful.
It's crazy.
Got to find out exactly what that was. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, they're clearly, like, Melancon's gotten the job done and probably will again. It's just how many save chances is he going to get?
Fair question. For the Rockies, they had 4 with a save. Daniel Bard led them with 20. This is, I think, pretty wide open. Carlos Estevez, Daniel Bard. They could sign somebody. I think Robert Stevenson is a dark horse candidate here as well.
Yeah, it was, who was it at the end of the year? It was
Carlos Estevez.
Carlos Estevez, who's not very good.
No.
But nobody's very good.
No.
So Estevez is the favorite going in, I would say, but another one like Rowan Wick, like Chris Stratton, just not interested at all.
All right. For the Dodgers, they had 10 different relievers with a save. Kenley Jansen led them with 38. Blake Trinan, we can't say definitively, Scott, because they could still re-sign Kenley Jansen or they could trade for somebody. But if they don't do that, let's say a month from now, then Blake Trinan would be the definitive option. It's just, we can't say it yet.
The Diamondbacks had a stretch last summer where they lost 31 out of 33 games.
Jeez.
Okay, so you were asking me about which bullpen?
The Dodgers?
The Dodgers, yes. Yes. So they could bring back Jansen, obviously, or trade for Kimbrel. I mean, the Dodgers, they could get whoever they want to close, basically. They could go trade for Josh Hader. That's been rumored for years. But if they don't, if for some reason they want to cut costs here, then yeah, I think Blake Trinan becomes the obvious choice and would become a very attractive choice. I mean, it's possible once Dave Roberts is free of the expectations that go with Kenley Jansen that he'll want to go all Kevin Cash with it and maybe Trinan want to get all the chances. But I mean, as the backup closer last year, he got 7. So like that's pretty good, getting 7 saves with the team who has Kenley Jansen, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and obviously the other numbers are great. 199 ERA, 0.98 WHIP. Yeah, definitely. Along with Jansen and Craig Kimbrel, I think Blake Trinan is the other reliever we're most anxious to find out what happens next with.
And in terms of just bullpens that we're anxious to find out what happens next with, Scott, the San Diego Padres have to be up there. They had 5 different relievers with a save last year. Obviously, Mark Melancon was fantastic with them. He led baseball with 39 saves. This is completely open right now. Pierce Johnson and Craig Stammen were strong relievers last season. Dinelson Lamet could be an option. They signed Robert Suarez from Japan. He performed very well there as a closer. Strikeouts weren't amazing or anything, but in terms of, Kenley or Kimbrel, I think the Padres are a prime landing spot for one of those guys.
I agree. If I had to pick today who would be their closer, it would be the guy they just well, they got him from the Cardinals, right? Gosh, I'm having trouble remembering his name. You just said it.
Robert Suarez? No.
Was it Robert Suarez?
They signed him from Japan.
No, it was you know what the name is? It's Luis Garcia.
Yes, he did sign Luis Garcia as well.
Yes, from the Cardinals.
He throws really hard.
Yes, I think he's an option. Emilio Pagan, who's been a closer before, he's still there.
Sure.
I can't imagine if the Padres are looking to contend that's all it ends up being. Like, I don't know why they didn't just re-sign Melancon. I don't know why the Braves last offseason didn't just re-sign Melancon. It's not like he's getting a lot of money, but they didn't. So it's very much a question mark right now. And there's really nobody I would pay much of anything for in the Padres bullpen either.
Scott, it's like a game of hot potato with Mark Melancon. You don't want to be the one last caught holding Mark Melancon on your team when he eventually, inevitably, I believe, implodes. I think it's going to happen. I just don't know when. Last team here, the San Francisco Giants, they had 8 with a save. Jake McGee led them with 31. I think Camilo Doval is the front runner, but could be a fluid situation.
Could be.
The Giants, Jake McGee really benefited just from an abundance of save opportunities. So the Giants led baseball with 85 save opportunities. Jake McGee got 31 of 56 converted saves. That's only 55%. So I know it feels like Gabe Kapler used him. He did use him the most, but he wasn't like a, lockdown closer or even a closer who got a ton of saves. Got 55% of their saves is not a massive amount.
Yes, but again, you have to look at why the straight saves were distributed like they were. Jake McGee was very much the closer in April, saved 7 games, struggled in May. Kapler lost faith in him, started going with Tyler Rogers instead. Regained his faith in McGee. McGee became the closer again, and then he got hurt late in the year, which allowed Camilo Doval to step in and claim the role that he kept throughout the playoffs, even after McGee came back. So for stretches, Kapler seemed to stick with one guy. At first McGee, then Rogers, then back to McGee, then Duvall. It didn't seem like a lot of mixing and matching going on there. So I feel like Camilo Duvall, we can call him a probable closer going into the season. And it's going to depend a lot on his performance. Of course, I'm hesitant to put a lot of faith in Kapler and how he's going to manage the bullpen, but
Right.
but he really did seem to favor Duvall in those high leverage spots last year, and I suspect he will going into this year too.
Especially late in the season, right? So September and the postseason combined, Camilo Duvall finished 8 games for the Giants. Jake McGee finished 5 of those. So we'll see. I think it's Duvall moving forward, but I'll also think that Gabe Kapler has a quick hook, and a younger reliever like Duvall, it makes me a little worried. So just keep those things in mind. Let's jump into ADP here, Scott. And obviously we're not going to talk in depth about every reliever because we only have so much time, but let's start up top. And first up, of course, Josh Hader and Liam Hendricks, who are both going in the 4th round of 12-team leagues right now. Josh Hader with an ADP of 42.5, Liam Hendricks at 44.3. There's obviously no concern over either one of these performance-wise, job security-wise. It's just, are you willing to use a 4th round pick on either one of them?
No. I'm sorry, saves just aren't that valuable. They're just not. There are other ways to get them. These guys are going to help in the ratio stats, I get it, but not nearly as much as your starting pitchers will. A lot of their contributions are going to be washed out by that. They're going ahead of the AL Cy Young winner last year, Robbie Ray. They're going ahead of a guy who hit 50 homers a couple years ago, Pete Alonso. Like, it's just, I can't justify it. It's I understand why people are doing it, but it wouldn't be me. Sorry.
Yeah, it's really the opportunity cost of taking a reliever this early and passing up on other players who you mentioned, Scott, like Pete Alonso and Robbie Ray. Now, what if I said this to you the other day on our third base position preview? You said that you were willing to pull third baseman up the board because of position scarcity. Can't you make a similar argument for closers?
You can make that argument, but it's not an apples to apples comparison because, as I was saying earlier in the show, you're primarily concerned with save totals here, and if you're in a traditional league, and those are mostly tied to how often a guy gets to get saved. Like, there are so many save options emerging on waivers. It's not the same at third base where there are these quality starting options emerging at third base off the waiver wire all year, and it's not the sort of thing where you could find the equivalent of a Scott Barlow who's going to potentially get 30 to 35 saves himself. And then if he doesn't, okay, well, who's his replacement? I'll plug him in as my closer instead. It's just not relief pitcher, closer. It's its own thing. And it's never something you want to invest that much in.
Just say it, Scott. What we're all thinking. It's gross. It's gross. Relief pitcher and closers are gross. It's tough to figure out, man. So overall, I agree with you. There's too much volatility for me to invest in that first group. I've never been able to do it. That the second, third tier, sure, I'll be willing to jump in there. I've never been able to jump in on someone like Hader or Hendricks.
On the rare occasion, and it certainly wouldn't be a year where they're going in round 4, but on the rare occasion where I've tried it, it's backfired, and because they ended up not giving me what I thought they were going to give me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're not foolproof. I understand Hendricks and Hader, they obviously have long, stable track records, but that's going to make it extra bad if for some reason they don't live up to expectations.
All right, the next group that we have here, 4 closers being drafted between picks 70 and 95. Raisel Iglesias at pick 71.5. That's the round 6-7 turn. Edwin Diaz at pick 84.8. That's the round 7-8 turn. Emmanuel Clase at pick 93. That's in round 8. Ryan Presley at pick 94.3. That is also in round 8. And Scott, in a Roto or head-to-head categories league, this is where I want to live. I want to grab one of these closers. It's second tier, Still kind of high in terms of opportunity cost, but obviously not as high as that previous group. And I think that these guys are all still really strong contributors across the board: strikeouts, ERA, whip, and saves.
Yeah, I mean, I could at least see myself doing it, but for me, the opportunity cost is still too high. I would need these guys to, I would need one of these guys to fall a couple rounds for me to take advantage, which is possible. I mean, it happens sometimes, but I'm not going to be living in this range like you are.
All right. I'll point out a few quick stats here. Raisel Iglesias, some hiccups early on, but he was amazing from May 1st on, 2.07 ERA. He actually finishes the RP2 in both formats ahead of Josh Hader. So he was awesome last season. Emmanuel Class A, his final 32 appearances, he allowed 16 hits, 2 walks, and 1 earned run. He was
Yep.
absolutely ridiculous. So if you have any concern over, can I trust this guy? I think you could trust him. Ryan Presley is probably the one I find myself drafting the most. Might not be the most flashy of this group, but just rock solid. He's been really, really strong for a couple of seasons, past 4 years, really. A 2.48 ERA, 104 whip during that span since the start of 2018. He only had 26 saves last year, but it was pretty fluky because the Astros were blowing teams out. I think they had the 8th fewest save opportunities, something weird like that, despite being as good of a team as they were. So year over year, that's not really a sticky stat. I mean, a team that's usually that good and wins that many games, I would imagine there's more save opportunities moving forward. So Ryan Presley, he goes the last of that group. He's the one that I wind up with the most. 4 more names going between picks 100 and 125. Aroldis Chapman at pick 102.5 in the 9th round. Kenley Jansen at pick 112.8 in the 10th round. Jordan Romano, 121.5 in round 11. And Will Smith at pick 125.3 also in round 11. All right, Scott, is this the group that you can find yourself targeting a closer?
It's not a high priority, but yes, this is the group where I might actually draft here. So we're talking about like round 10, round 11 in a 12-team league on average. And I'm okay with that because that's the point where it's starting pitcher and all the hitter positions, we see a drop right around that same range, round 10, round 11. So if I'm really satisfied with what I've already built, or if I just feel like anyone I'd be taking there would be not that clear of an improvement over somebody I could take 3 or 4 rounds from, then I might go for the reliever. And most likely it would be Jordan Romano. Fingers crossed the Blue Jays don't get anybody else, because if they don't, I mean, he could be a stud himself. Or it would be Will Smith. Those would be the 2 I'd most likely draft. We haven't gotten to Kimbrel yet, right?
We have not gotten to
I like the value of Kimbrel while things are up in the air for him. Obviously, it's a bit of a risk, but it officially the White Sox want to trade him so he can close for somebody else, and his strikeout potential is still second to none at the position. So had a nice bounce back year overall. Struggled a little after being moved to the White Sox, where he pitched in a setup role, but the overall numbers were still awesome.
All right, yeah. Look, if I miss out on the previous group, I do like to jump in here, with the exception of Aroldis Chapman. Spoiler alert, he will be my bust when we get to sleepers, breakouts, and busts, and I will tell you why. Kenley Jansen, kind of a weird season for him. Like, the surface numbers were awesome, but the walks were also the highest they were since his rookie season in 2010. He had a lot of BABIP luck as well, 213, but does a great job limiting hard contact, and his velocity jumped up in a big way. I mean, it matched a career high for Kenley Jansen. So we're kind of waiting for him to fall off this cliff. I know he's 34 years old, but he just continues to get it done. So I don't doubt Kenley Jansen personally myself. Romano is awesome. Just want to make sure that they don't sign or bring someone else in. Will Smith, some hiccups, but lots of job security, I believe, at least until Kirby Yates returns, Scott. I thought that was kind of curious that the Braves signed Kirby Yates. He'll probably return some point mid-season, but I don't know. Does that make you a little bit worried about how they feel, Will Smith, that they signed someone like Kirby Yates?
No, I mean, Kirby Yates, before having his elbow issues was, somebody who could, you just look at his ability, how much he dominated as a closer, yes, for the Padres, but obviously that would translate to any role. I think as long as Will Smith is getting the job done, they'd stick with him. And I'm not going to worry about a guy coming off Tommy John surgery who at some point is going to be back, months from now. Like it just doesn't seem like it's worth worrying about. If you play in like a really deep league, like an NL only league, I could see stashing Kirby Yates away in the hope that happens. But I don't think it's reason to shy away from Will Smith, because by that point, so much turnover is going to have happened in so many bullpens across the sport.
Oh, for sure. Picks 140 through 170. We see a mix of closer candidates, and we see our first two SPARPs here as well. So Ranger Suarez at pick 140, Giovanni Gallegos at pick 145.8, Luis Severino 154, Mark Melanson at 167, and Craig Kimbrell at 169.
There you go. Love that value. Love that value.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even if it doesn't work out, he doesn't get traded to close somewhere. You haven't given up that much, because what is that round wise? What is that in a 12-team league? We're talking like
14, 15 turn.
Yeah. They haven't given up that much. And he might still be useful for you just as a ratios play as the White Sox setup man, if that's still where he is. So I love that value. I do want to mention for Ranger Suarez, in the leagues where you could take advantage of that relief pitcher eligibility, points leagues, he's going to go earlier than that. He's going to go, what was his ADP, like 140?
140 on the nose.
140. Yeah, he's going to go more around 110, maybe even earlier.
I was thinking 120, maybe around 10, something like that.
Yeah. Because people know.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Craig Kimbrell, by the way, Scott, if he is traded to a team and let's just say we know for sure, or, we feel pretty good that he's going to be the closer, how much do you think the ADP jumps? Do you think he can get all the way up to like that Aroldis Chapman, Kenley Jansen range?
Yeah, that's probably about where he'll go. Yeah, there are going to be some concerns because he kind of stumbled to the finish line as the White Sox setup man. People are going to be a little hesitant to draft him according to his upside. So yeah, I think around Chapman, Jansen, who have some similar performance concerns, I think that makes sense. So he'll jump about, what is that, 50 spots?
Yeah. So Craig Kimbrell, 169.8. Yeah. I mean, it's about exactly 50 spots. So we're talking, something like 4 rounds of value for Craig Kimbrell that you could potentially gain if you're drafting now, which, look, most sane people probably should not be drafting now. I will admit, I am somebody who is drafting now, but I'm not a sane person. So that's why I'm doing
I have not built an actual team yet, just mocked.
Most people should not. All right, Scott, let's quickly hit on sleepers, breakouts, and busts. Obviously, this position is pretty tough to figure out, but do you have a sleeper candidate that you like at relief pitcher?
So I've pretty much given my reasoning already for all 3 of these picks. My sleeper is Dylan Floro. I think he's good enough to keep closing, particularly since Don Mattingly has shown an inclination to go with kind of atypical relievers in that spot. I'm thinking, man, I'm having trouble remembering names. Brandon Kinsler a couple years ago.
Yep.
And Floro did fine in the role. So, he could lose his job to Bender, but everybody could lose their job to somebody. So I think, considering even in like those really deep rotisserie leagues where people are going crazy for the closers, you can get Floro really late. Like he's what allows me to get 3 probable closers, even without having to invest that much in the position, because that's how late he goes. 264th player off the board on average.
All right. Yeah. Dylan Floro, definitely a risk reward candidate. I think you could say that probably about a lot of these closer candidates that go at the point of the draft that he does. And my sleeper is Ken Giles. I know we mentioned the Mariners situation, but because it's so fluky and messy right now, you could even say that has pushed the ADP on Ken Giles way down, pick 363. So You can draft him very late in your drafts, probably as like your third closer candidate. And first month into the season, you'll know if he's involved, if he's pitching well. I think he's going to be the guy. I think they signed him to that 2-year deal for a reason. Now, they probably didn't see Drew Steckenrider and Paul Sewald pitching as well as they did last year before they signed Ken Giles. But the last time we saw Giles, he was still ridiculous back in 2019. Over 14 strikeouts per 9, 23 saves with the Toronto Blue Jays. So I love the value where he's going. If you play in very deep leagues, draft and hold, NL only, I mentioned the name Art Warren. His ADP is 534. It's very, very late. Most people, you probably won't even have to worry about him all season. He pitches for the Reds, kind of a fluid situation as well. And he had a 19% swinging strike rate last year, only 21 innings, small sample size, but he also has closing experience in the minors. So something that I'm kind of interested in there. Art Warren and Ken Giles. A breakout, Scotty, who you got?
Yes, I'm going to go with the guy I've mentioned probably more than anyone else to this point in the podcast, and that's Scott Barlow, who doesn't seem to be getting a lot of credit for appearing to claim the job in the second half last year. I mean, once he got it, he pretty much didn't look back. He's being drafted right around 200th on average, so still very late. 91 strikeouts last year. I mean, anytime you can approach 100 as a reliever, that speaks to a lot of ability. 2.42 ERA, around a 1.2 WHIP. It's a little high, but everything else looked great. And I don't see why Mike Matheny would go any other direction to begin the year. Can't say for sure. I mean, Barlow's not tested enough that I can say for sure he's going to keep the job all year. But to avoid having to pay a premium for saves, I'm okay taking him as my number one closer that late. Like if I can get, maybe it's more like my number two. I've noticed a trio I've been drafting a lot in Roto leagues is Camilo Duvall, Scott Barlow, and Dylan Floro. Chances that all three hold the job all year are pretty low, but they're all three going to start out with it, I think. That's going to give me an early advantage even over somebody who invested in two high-end guys, paid a lot more, but only for two guys as opposed to my three. It's going to give me an early advantage, and there's a good chance two of the three do keep the job all year. I think they're in a position to do that. It's just going to mostly come down to how they perform. So that seems like a more cost-efficient way to build the bullpen, and I'm willing to take on the added risk that comes with it. Because I think the upside, the upside when you're mostly thinking in terms of saves isn't going to be that different.
All right, breakout for me, someone who's done it before. Taylor Rogers. The ADP is 245 as of now. I just think that he is far and away the best reliever in the Twins bullpen. I know he's a left-handed reliever, which typically we don't see a lot of left-handed closers in the game, but he's done it before, and he's done it under Rocco Baldelli. Baldelli's first season as the manager in 2019, Rogers was the guy. He had 30 saves that season. He finished as a top 12 closer in fantasy that season, 2.61 ERA, 1.00 WHIP. You look at his ERA the last 3 full seasons that he's pitched, 2.63, 2.61, 3.35. And last year, his strikeout stuff was the best we've ever seen, over 13 strikeouts per 9. So there's a chance that, they mix and match. But I think once they realize that Taylor Rogers is far and away their best reliever, that they're going to stick with him. And I think that he has a chance to truly return some massive value for those who play in Roto or categories league. So I like targeting him as my second closer when I have someone like Ryan Presley or Emmanuel Clase as my first. So Taylor Rogers for me, and Scotty, a bust at relief pitcher.
Giovanni Gallegos. It has nothing to do with performance. I think
Scott, Lego My Gallegos, you're turning your back on him.
Well, that was what I named one of my fantasy teams 2 years ago because I thought, he's the best reliever. The Cardinals are going to make him the closer. So, I've learned that they don't really want him to close. They'll do it if they have to, if they're backed into that corner, like they were at the end of last year, but that's not really the role they want for him. So I think they'll be trying as early as spring training to make Gallegos not their closer. And I don't think his ADP really accounts for that possibility.
All right. Bust for me. I've hinted at it a few times so far. That is Aroldis Chapman, who has an ADP of 102.5. Last year, a 3.36 ERA, 1.31 whip. He walked over 6 batters per 9 last year with the Yankees. His ERA was the highest it was since 2011. The whip that I mentioned was a career high for Aroldis Chapman. He was amazing in the first 2 months of the season, but then there was that sticky substance crackdown, June 1st, around that time. The final 4 months for Chapman, 4.95 ERA, 1.62 whip. The K- walk percentage dropped tremendously, a 3.94 Sierra during that time. Among pitchers with at least 20 innings pitched last season, Chapman had the third biggest drop in K- walk rate from before the sticky substance crackdown to after the sticky substance crackdown. So I think obviously there's a chance that he bounces back. I think you could say that for most relievers or closers, but given the volatility already baked into the position, I don't want to mess around with that as my first closer. So, and I think that there is a lot of risk involved with drafting a Aroldis Chapman as that.
I have a little bit of concern about Chapman for the reasons you mentioned. I don't think I have nearly as much concern about Chapman as you do, because most of the struggles after the sticky substance ban they came immediately. He had a horrible stretch at the end of June, start of July. His ERA ballooned from 178 to 471. But then from that point forward, basically half the season, 29 appearances, he had a 195 ERA. He struck out 48 and 27 and 2/3 innings at a 17% swinging strike rate. I mean, the stuff was still elite. He did walk way too many guys. So, that might be attributable to the sticky substance ban, but like apart from that, he dominated, and it still led to a sub-2 ERA. So I think I don't want to overrate that one very small stretch of the season where he was horrible.
Fair point. Fair point. I'll mention it's the final year of his contract as well. So, do they have a shorter leash on Aroldis Chapman this year? I think it's a possibility. They have other talented relievers there, Jonathan Loaizaga and Chad Green on the roster as well. Before we just talk about the rest of the ADP, Scott, just quick thoughts on saves plus holds. I know a lot of people have transitioned into this format because, frankly, just playing with saves makes you want to rip your hair out. I kind of like it. I like, how much strategy there is and the chase of finding saves. It's what makes fantasy fun. But if you play in saves plus holds leagues, what is your strategy in that type of format?
So obviously not to pay as much for reliever. I find that people tend to overvalue the high-end holds guys and undervalue the kind of mid-tier closers. Closers accumulate saves at a faster rate than setup men accumulate holds. The league leader in saves is going to be around 40. The league leader in holds is going to be around 20. So if it's save plus holds and you're weighing them equally, you'd still rather get a saves source than a holds source. So that's pretty much how I'd approach it. I mean, I still want to play up for Josh Hader, Liam Hendricks, but somebody like Chapman potentially, or Will Smith, they're not going to be valued nearly the same. And comparatively, I'd rather have them, I think, than like a Paul Sewald.
All right. Yeah. I think if you play in a league where just holds is a category, how do you attack that stat? You want to find strong relievers on good teams. It's as simple as that. Specifically, the Atlanta Braves. I mean, they had 3 of the top 10 holds leaders last season in Luke Jackson, Tyler Matzik, and AJ Minter. So I thought that was interesting. But the rest of the holds leaders last year, Blake Trinan, Tyler Rogers, Genesis Cabrera with the St. Louis Cardinals, Devin Williams, Brad Boxberger, Andrew Chafin, Tyler Duffy, Yusmero Petit, Adam Ottavino, Ryan Tepera, and Ryan Stanek with the Houston Astros. It's got the rest of the ADP from picks 180 through 200. Camilo Duval, who is somebody you mentioned you like to target yourself. Blake Trinan, obviously. We didn't talk about this. If Kenley signs somewhere else and Blake Trinan becomes the guy, the ADP right now is 193. How much do you think he moves up? Do you think you could see Blake Trinan getting all the way up into that 110, 120 area like Chapman and Kenley Jansen?
Yeah, I think he could go around where Jordan Romano goes, which is, basically that same range. Yep. I I think that's what would happen.
All right, so it could be a massive boon to Blake Trinan's value. Pick 200 to 240. Scott Barlow at pick 208. Corey Knable, 226.5. Cal Quantrill at 238.3. And Gregory Soto, 238.5. Scott, we talked a little bit about Soto earlier, but along with the questions that we have about his job security and the fact that Michael Fulmer was actually better than him, the strikeouts are good for Soto. The whip and the walks are really, really bad. So even if you're drafting Soto, like, you have to bake in that he is going to actively hurt your whip every time he is out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that should be the least of your concerns, frankly.
Right.
Is just how consistently is he going to give you saves? He's not somebody I'm going to invest much of anything in. Like, I would definitely go Dylan Floro over him. I'd go Joe Barlow of the Rangers over him. I'd probably even go like Lou Trevino over him.
All right, picks 240 through 260. Taylor Rogers at pick 245. David Bednar at 246. Jake McGee at 251.8. Garrett Whitlock at 257.3. And Aaron Ashby at 259.8. We didn't talk as much about the SPARPs. We mentioned them up top, obviously, Scott. I mean, Aaron Ashby is someone who a lot of smart people have pegged as a potential breakout candidate this year. Maybe more of a sleeper candidate. Obviously, there's a lot of crossover between those terms. I just don't know if he's going to start. I don't know what his role is going to be, but I think the stuff is pretty filthy when he's on.
Yeah, I love the ability, elite ground ball skills, and swing and miss. That's a high ceiling when you can combine those two skills. But yeah, I don't know when there's going to be an opportunity. There's no opening in the Brewers rotation right now. And look, at one point, Josh Hader was trying to break in as a starter, and it never ended up happening because he became so valuable as a bullpen piece. And I fear that could happen with Aaron Ashby. But yeah, obviously I like the upside.
All right, picks 260 through 280. Joe Barlow at 262, Lou Trevino 264.3, and Dylan Floro at 276.3. We obviously, Scott, you like Scott Barlow, but Joe Barlow, he was the closer down the stretch. The underlying numbers not as good. The Rangers are a team where they're making all these moves. It wouldn't surprise me if they try to bring somebody else in as well.
I'd be a little surprised, but
okay.
But yeah, it could happen. It could happen. I think as long as they don't, Barlow's clearly going to be the guy to begin the year. I just don't know if he's good enough to hold on to it. So I prefer Dylan Floro among the pitchers who fit into that category. But Joe Barlow is kind of my backup to Floro. And then Lou Trevino is kind of my backup to Joe Barlow.
Picks 280 through 300. Matt Barnes, 289.3. Drew Rasmussen, 292. Lucas Sims, 292. Andrew Kittredge at 295.8. Alex Reyes at 296.8. And Devin Williams at 297. 300 plus ADP, Christian Javier, Paul Sewald, Ian Kennedy, Denelson Lamet, Michael Fulmer, Rowan Wick, and Ken Giles. Anything that you'd like to add on that group, Scott? Giles, Wick, Fulmer, Lamet, Kennedy, Sewald, Javier.
Oh, I think I'm curious to see if Javier's ever going to get a chance to start again. He was fine as a starter. He's good as a starter, but then they sent him to the bullpen midway through last season and never brought him back to the rotation. So I don't know what the plan is for him, but very curious to find out.
All right.
One pitcher I want to mention specifically, James Karinchak, who, we talk about how secure Emmanuel Clase seems in his role for the Guardians. And part of that, obviously part of it's how good Clase was last year, but James Karinchak wasn't the same in the second half. Like, he looks like a guy who may have been completely ruined by the foreign substance crackdown. 68 strikeouts in 39 and a third innings in the first half. So almost 2-1 there. A little less than 2-1, but 15.6 K per nine. 5.6 K per nine in the second half.
Yikes.
With 10 walks to 10 strikeouts. Like, his stuff and it's in his spin rates were way down. Like, he just wasn't right anymore. And I don't know if he ever will be again, but I don't think he's a serious threat to Emmanuel Clase as things stand right now.
All right, for those who play in deep, deep draft and hold leagues. Some of my favorite late round darts: Anthony Bender, Jorge Alcala with the Minnesota Twins, Chris Stratton with the Pirates. It is crazy to me that Chris Stratton's ADP is 497 and David Bednar's ADP is 246. So unless I missed something, I know that Bednar is the better reliever. I don't know. It doesn't seem like they should be that far apart. Art Warren is another one. Brad Boxberger and Dylan Coleman, super deep. He's in the Royals bullpen. The stuff is nasty for Dylan Coleman. Let's wrap it up, Scotty. We're gonna end it with the new Kokomo Friday. I think the point that many people have been waiting for. I teased it. I threw it out there on Twitter. Once again, I want to thank our buddies who put it together here. Our friends Doc Krotzer and I want to make sure I get the name correctly here. Dave Scaff, Doc Krotzer and Dave Scaff, our buddies here. I played softball with Doc. He's a great softball player. So thanks again to those guys for putting it together. We'll play it here. We'll have a few final thoughts for you, and then we'll wrap up the weekend. But here it goes. Kokomo 2022. Enjoy.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in Boca. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aarondola. Giolito, Castillo, Yoshito, Mosutsugo. Live from NYC. And wrapping gifts near Miami. Set sail with FBT, your course to victory. Don't sleep on OBP. Nemo, Reese, and Kevin B. Chris talks with bands you'll never see. Scott hates Ted Lasso. On Twitter, Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in Boca. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aarondola. Giolito, Castillo, Yoshito,
Carlo and Votto, value so high, but ADP so low. Frank loves him some kind of Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
Frank loves him some Connor Joe. And not only do I love me some Connor Joe, I love the new rendition of Kokomo Friday. Once again,
Yes.
shout out to our guys, Doc Krotzer and Dave Scaff, for helping us out with that. It's awesome, Scott. I mean, I'm blown away. It's amazing. I love it.
I know, like they just the thing that the way he mixes the music and uses the vocals in it, like it's so much. The song is so much better than like the actual Kokomo. Forget the clever lyrics that are about us in fantasy baseball. Like it just is a good song, you know, in a way that the actual song it's based on isn't. So.
Man,
I
it's
love
like try to listen to that song without bobbing your head. It is impossible. I mean, it just puts a smile on your face every time you hear it. So moving forward, obviously, we'll play the new Kokomo, but we'll still mix in the old one because I'm sure our FBT OGs out there, they love hearing the Adam loves him some. I just messed it up, Scott. Raisins are shriveled grapes. So there you go. That's what I wanted to say, and I completely butchered it. But of course, I love the OG Kokomo as well. So shout out to those guys for putting it together. And it's going to be a lot of fun moving forward. We're going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching Fantasy Baseball today. We'll be back again on Monday. Bye-bye.